Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin in Ottawa this evening, where a major police operation continues to crack down on Parliament Hill occupation.
22 days ago, a convoy of truckers and other vehicles arrived downtown to protest COVID-19 restrictions. Officers have now made dozens of arrests and cleared a number of large vehicles out as well. But as Kevin Gallagher reports, restoring downtown will take a long time.
In a massive show of force, police moved in on protesters occupying downtown Ottawa. Multiple arrests come after repeated warnings for demonstrators to leave.
The people occupying Ottawa have been given plenty of time to leave peacefully. They know there are consequences for not doing so.
Still, many reject the protest as breaking laws, despite blocking streets in Canada's capital for nearly 4 weeks.
Illegally blocking the roadway? Where do you think 1,000 vehicles are going to go?
Everything the police are doing right now is unlawful.
The recently implemented Emergencies Act threatens heavy fines for bringing children into the protest zone. Still, some were placed in the middle of this hostile situation.
For what?
Outspoken organizer Pat King streamed his own arrest live on Facebook. Other convoy leaders have already distanced themselves from him because of his white supremacist views.
You must leave. You will be arrested.
Earlier today, remaining protest spokespeople denounced today's police action.
The whole world is watching, and you will rally support like you have never experienced.
Former RCMP officer Daniel Bulford was arrested shortly after that press conference. When the arrest started, some demonstrators vowed to stay until all COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. But the reality of harsh penalties encouraged others to pull out.
If your truck is being used in these protests, your bank account will be frozen and your insurance will be suspended.
The situation downtown remains fluid. Police have made at least 70 arrests and promised to work around the clock until the streets are cleared. Kevin Gallagher, CTV News, Ottawa.
And the situation in the capital continues to grow more and more tense. There is word now that police have begun using pepper spray to clear away the occupiers. We will have more as well a little later in the news hour. You heard from Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland about those bank accounts being frozen. We'll have more on that later in the news hour.
Cases of COVID-19 continue to grow in Northern First Nation communities. Anishinaabe Aski Nation Grand Chief Derek Fox is calling out on the provincial and federal government for a lack of consultation on loosening restrictions when things are far from okay up north. Several First Nations are in a state of emergency as nursing shortages and overcrowded homes sit atop the concerns of leadership. Alex Flood has the details.
A number of communities across Anishinaabe Aski Nation are still seeing high COVID-19 numbers relative to Ontario's latest totals. On Thursday, NAN was reporting 651 active cases in just 25 of their communities. 5 of those First Nations are under a state of emergency and have suspended non-essential and intercommunity travel. Grand Chief Derek Fox says the provincial government is lifting restrictions too quickly and fears for the health and safety of residents living in NAN.
We know for sure that they did not take into consideration that the far north is still fighting this pandemic, and that we are still very deeply concerned with the possible risk of loss of life, and of course the risk of people getting very sick.
Mushkegowgaming Ojibwe Nation has witnessed a slight decrease in cases as neighboring communities and support teams have flown in to provide assistance. Meanwhile, Edmonton First Nation tops the list of active COVID cases in NAN First Nations with 158. Their nursing station is experiencing staffing shortages, and concerns surrounding a burned-out healthcare system continue to mount. He also says many area homes are overcrowded, making the virus more transmissible.
Once a case is found within the First Nation, people need to isolate. There's nowhere for them to go. If there's 10, 15 people in a home, how are they supposed to isolate? You know, there's no buildings for them to go to. I know in Bearskin, when that outbreak happened, there was talk of some domes being sent up. But it's -40, -50 up there at this time. So how are those domes going to help?
Nan is also seeking clarification from Transport Canada on how the current vaccine travel mandate will be affected as restrictions are eased. Fox is hopeful an update will be provided within the coming days. Alex Flood, TBT News.
Today's blast of winter weather across northwestern Ontario has caused several highway closures east of Thunder Bay, the first of which occurred this afternoon near Pearl after a transport jackknifed. That incident has since been cleared up and the highway has reopened. A second collision, though, occurred shortly after 5 o'clock between Nipigon and Schreiber near Pays Plat First Nation. As a result of worsening road conditions, the highway has been closed by the OPP from Pass Lake through Schreiber. Well, the Thunder Bay District Health Unit is reporting another COVID-19 death. 78 people in the district have now died from the virus since the pandemic began. Meanwhile, the Regional Health Sciences Centre saw a big drop in its COVID numbers today.
The number of COVID patients at the regional hospital has fallen from 47 down to 38. 10 of those patients are in intensive care. Overall, the hospital is now operating at nearly 107% capacity, while ICU occupancy has fallen to 68%. The Thunder Bay District Health Unit is reporting 196 new cases since its last update on Wednesday. There are now 315 active cases across the district, up from 282. There are 50 total hospitalizations in the TBDHU, with 11 in intensive care. Over in the Northwestern Health Unit, there are now 442 active cases. Nearly half of those come from the Sioux Lookout Health Hub, but the number there has fallen from 252 to 212. And the 7-day test positivity rate across the NWHU has dipped to 22.7%.
While Ontario's proof of vaccination rules are set to change on next month, the province's top doctor says mask mandates could be around in certain settings for some time to come.
If and when we transition, it would be from a mandate to mask to a recommendation to mask. I would certainly hope that vulnerable members of our community that are at risk for this virus, that are immune suppressed or transplant patients in public spaces would continue to mask. And we may review masking for public spaces like and transport systems like subways, buses, etc., to ensure that everyone's confident to use those resources.
Dr. Kieran Moore says the threat from COVID-19 remains real, and his team will monitor when mask rules can be lifted. As for vaccine passports, he says they've served their purpose, and the science supports the decision to end proof of vaccination requirements on March 1st.
A pair of Thunder Bay men are in custody in connection to two separate series of break-ins across the city over the last month. 32-year-old Peter Bundy has been charged with 5 counts of break-and-enter in the East End between January 11th and February 9th. Meanwhile, 36-year-old Christopher Umbosch has been charged in connection to a separate spree of robberies in the Port Arthur area, 3 of them that were committed between January 13th and February 13th. Both men remain in custody.
6 local organizations are getting some important funding to help them better serve the community. Almost $3 million from DSAB Social Service Relief Fund provided through the province will allow a number of projects to move ahead for local shelters, kitchens, and more. Vasilios Bellos has the details.
The nearly $3 million in funding is for the Thunder Bay District Social Services Administration Board. It helps 7 initiatives from 6 organizations, with 2 projects from Ottawa First Nations management receiving the bulk of the funding, over $1.5 million. Dilico Anishinaabeg Family Care also receiving a significant amount, $800,000. Also on the list is $231,000 for Grace Place, $195,000 for Urban Abbey, $77,000 for Marjorie House, and $52,000 for John Howard Society. District Social Services Administration Board CEO Bill Bradica says without this funding, many of the projects would not be possible.
It's been used to assist some existing organizations with their buildings to improve, for example, kitchen facilities, air handling systems, and in some cases to expand existing space. So for example, at Urban Abbey, to expand from 4 shelter beds to up to 10 shelter beds for women.
Part of the funds allotted to Ottawa First Nations management will be used to create supportive housing units for families, which is still under construction. as well as a new community kitchen. Program manager Robin Haliak notes the impact the new build will have on residents and the community alike, teaching important life lessons and providing a sense of stability.
It can really mean the difference between keeping their kids and not keeping their children. We know that if we can reduce those barriers for families that are struggling, the less likelihood that we'll be seeing kids apprehended and taken into care. So for our families, it isn't women specific, it isn't men specific, it is about families and keeping them together.
The first community kitchen is planned for March, while construction on the community housing is set to be completed in the spring. Vasilios Bellows, TBT News.
The federal government has announced nearly $4 million in funding for community infrastructure projects across northwestern Ontario. 2 are here in Thunder Bay, and there's also $2.1 million that will help cover 4 First Nations-led projects as well. Here in our city, the Community Tennis Center received a $500,000 commitment for a 45,000 square foot all-season racket sport facility. The next step for the tennis center will be to reach an agreement with the city to use the land at Chapels Park. The goal is to have shovels in the ground this summer and the facility ready to use by the time the snow falls next winter. The news comes at an exciting time with interest in the sport growing locally. Tennis Center Vice President Pasi Pinta believes the facility will have a big impact on the next generation of tennis players here in our city.
There's no reason why Thunder Bay couldn't produce the next Miloshes, the Biancas, the Lilas, the Dennises, or the Daniels. Having a facility like that in here to really not only for recreational players like myself, but want to be old-timer competitors like myself, and then the up-and-comers that can be the next Miloshes or the Biancas.
Meanwhile, $750,000 has been directed to the City of Thunder Bay for Phase 1 of the North Core Streetscape project. The first phase of that will cost $2.2 million to rebuild underground infrastructure, streets, and pedestrian boulevards on Court Street from Wilson Street to Park Avenue.
If you're looking for some winter fun this Family Day weekend, then you're in luck. Fort William Historical Park will host a number of family-friendly outdoor activities over the long weekend. Saturday through Monday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., visitors can participate in a variety of fun activities, such as tubing, skating, snowshoeing, and more. Kids will also have the chance to meet some of the barn animals, and the Thunder Bay Museum will host events and demonstrations on site throughout the weekend. Fort William Historical Park General Manager Patrick Morash is excited to finally host the first Family Day event in 3 years.
It's huge, both for us and I think for the community more broadly. As people know, people in Thunder Bay have been looking for all sorts of opportunities to get out and do stuff, and it's been tough to find those opportunities, and this is one of those opportunities for the whole community.
Tickets are $5 per person, while children 5 and under can enter for free. Mandatory masking and physical distancing protocols will be in place, and all activities will be held outdoors.
The owners of a local coffee shop have decided to take a negative experience and use it to make a positive impact on the community. Bay Village Coffee was broken into a few weeks ago, and the rock that caused the damage has been turned into an art piece that will soon be auctioned off for a good cause. Jessa Clement has that story.
A coffee shop that aims to bring positivity and kindness to the community was in shock after an incident a few weeks ago. Bay Village Coffee was victim of a break-in where their door window was smashed in by a large rock. But instead of letting the negativity get to them, co-owners Alan Forbes and Gary Mack decided to make the best out of a bad situation.
We just got to talking about how can we turn this situation around. It's a really terrible situation. It's quite costly for us, but we needed to find some way to feel good and to turn that around. So we thought about inviting May Porter to come in and paint the rock that came through the window and see if we can auction it off for the Our Hearts at Home campaign.
The rock is now decorated with images of plants, animals, and people, with help from local artist May Porter, and will soon be auctioned off to raise money for the Our Hearts at Home campaign, which is a fundraiser dedicated to bringing cardiovascular surgery to northwestern Ontario. Along with auctioning off the painted rock, the coffee shop has also been selling cookies in support of the campaign and has raised $10,000 for the cause.
The reason it means so much to us is last November we lost a very dear friend to heart disease. She had a heart attack. She spent about a month in ICU, and then ultimately she passed away. And it was devastating for us and our coffee shop here. And we wanted to do something to show that, you know.
The rock is currently with the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Foundation and will be put up for auction on February 22nd. The owners hope that this contribution will have a huge impact on the campaign and will bring us one step closer to having cardiovascular surgery in Thunder Bay. Jessa Clement, TVT News.
And that's just such a fantastic story, honestly, turning something negative and making it positive. Well, if you joined us late and missed any of our top local stories today, or you want to see them again, they'll be available to you this evening on tvnewswatch.com. You can also follow along on social media. Please like TB News on Facebook. We can be found there at TB News TBay. And you can follow us on Twitter as well at TBnews_TBay.
Well, Fiona, we heard about the havoc that the conditions played on the highways today, and it was tough sledding here in the city as well, driving conditions and low visibility out there.
Yeah, and that's because the winds were pretty much all over the place. There were times that they were very low, 4, 5, 6 kilometers per hour, and then suddenly they would gust up to 13 to 20 at times. But for the most part, they were fairly light. But it was just that light snow making it very difficult for folks who are traveling. Now, we started the day with a low of -33 and a wind chill of -42. That was, fortunately for most of us, at 4 a.m. when we were all inside and hopefully sleeping through it. But we did warm up to -11, wind chill -12 at its warmest point. We weren't the only ones who had a very cold night. -45 was the wind chill to the west in Fort Frances, up through Dryden and all the way northeast to Greenstone overnight. So at this hour, I guess folks aren't complaining too much, with temperatures of -18 and some light snow, -17 in Kenora and Dryden and Upsala. Red Lake also at -17, -16 in Sioux Lookout and in Armstrong. Eastward into Greenstone, they're at -18. The snow has just begun in the last couple of hours. Marathon at -15 and -13 in Sault Ste. Marie. Of course, the wind chill is making it feel anywhere from 8 to 12 degrees colder than all of those numbers would suggest. So it is definitely still a very cold night. And tonight is going to be not quite as bad, but it's working on it. A low of -21 with that snow ending. However, the winds are going to pick up from the northwest, 20 up to 56 kilometers per hour, and that's expected for most of the night. And that strong wind is going to support those wind chills of -31. Now, as we head into our Family Day weekend, it's going to be, a colder start to the weekend, but as we head into Sunday, we've got another round of snow coming in. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because behind it, we have a nice little warm up in temperatures, but it's going to be brief. I have to emphasize it's going to be brief, because for the holiday Monday, well, it's going to be cold once again. I'll have more details later on in the news hour.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fiona. Well, the temperature is dropping in Ottawa as well in terms of the actual conditions out there, but the tempers continue to flare. There is word now that some protesters are trying to disarm police, grabbing their guns or pepper spray. When we return, however, we'll have more on the funding and the effort to turn that off. It's allowed those protests to go ahead. Stay with us. We'll have more after the break.